Great. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening to me talk about my favorite subject for 15 minutes. You're a captive audience. I'm sorry. Um, Today I'll be talking about using MITRE ATT&CK and the Center for Threat Informed Defense's summoning the pyramid framework to assess threat detection resilience. I should say, hey everyone, nice to meet you. Nice to see you again. My name is Eli Shore, and I lead threat detection engineering for Accenture Americas. All right. Real quick show of hands. Who's familiar with the Pyramid of Pain? Hopefully. Okay, great. Yeah, pretty legendary at this point. Now, how about summoning the pyramid? How many folks are familiar with that framework? Okay, awesome. That's great. So I'll give a quick breakdown for folks that aren't as familiar. This builds off of that concept of that pyramid of pain and splits out that pyramid in some useful ways. So I'm going to call them from now on like STP 1 through 5. Now we've got network host artifacts, domain names, IP addresses, hash values. All of those values are kind of condensed into this one category that we call ephemeral. And that's the very first layer we have there. This is all the stuff that can be changed really easily. File names, you name it. Now, then we actually split out tools into two different categories. So, long story short, there's the tools that the threat actor brought with them, you know, your malware, your vulnerable drivers. There's also the tools that were already existing there. It's the applications that they exploit, it's the Windows operating system. And then finally at TTPs, we've got that split out into two other categories as well. So you can either hit something at like that procedural level of a sub-technique. One example of how a threat actor accomplishes this attack, or you can be right up there at STP5 core to sub-technique. You're effectively capturing a whole host of other threat actors that are trying to accomplish the same attack. So one thing that we've started playing around with internally and added is the idea of resilience based off these scores. We did a bit of a thought exercise and said, hey, how long would it take, an advanced adversary to bypass detection rules at these levels? Let's assume that they're probably pretty smart. They make a living doing this, so they're pretty highly motivated. Now this is just a swag. It depends case by case. But we said roughly, okay, ephemeral values, you could probably get past them in what, seconds, minutes? Adversary tool, at the adversary tool level, we might have bought ourselves a few days. If we're lucky. Pre-existing tools, okay, now it's maybe a few weeks. They've got to find a new thing to exploit. They've got to weaponize it. We might have bought ourselves a little bit of time. And now as we get into implementations and core to technique, this is when we're really buying ourselves some breathing room where we can refine our coverage. So I want to give a quick example so that's a little more digestible. So this is looking at the different ways that we can detect LSAS memory dumping for cred stealing. Now, way down at the bottom, we have what we used to see all the time in the industry, just a simple hash-based detection or a file name. Now we've started seeing more rules that are focused on some behavior of that malware. So the command line containing mimikatz, or mimikatz or invoke mimikatz or mimikatz.exe, or the parent process being when DBG or procdump and the process being LSAS. Now, as we step further, this becomes a lot more resilient. Up until this point, these are all values that the threat actor has direct control over. They can change the names, they can recompile the system, or the process. As we go further, it becomes we're kind of leaving the threat actor's zone of control. So you can look at more like the internal things that are happening behind the scenes. So run DLL running, executing SVCS DLL with a specific event. Even better, hey, let's look at the actual API function call that's being used for that particular dump. But the most resilient way we can do this is go straight to the kernel and say, what is actually happening under the hood when this dump is occurring? Which processes are they using? They're calling int open process or ZW open process. Sorry, a lot of technical talk. What we started doing is seeing how this plays out with threat responses. So just did a quick mapping of looking at, okay, what were the detection rules that we saw the industry produce in response to Hermetic Wiper? Now, all of these vendors are, Magic Quadrant, top right, with the exception of one. You could probably pick them out of the lineup. We want to see, okay, at what level is the quality of these immediate responses? And then also, how long does it take for them to move on? Shockingly scary in a lot of cases. We saw a lot of vendors that were looking for ephemeral values, like the compromised company. And that was all that was in place for weeks or months. Others, and this is one I like to pick on, wizard.dll. You can pull someone off the street and ask them how they get around that, and they could probably figure it out. They won't know how to recompile the malware, but they at least understand what it needs to happen. That's a scary place to leave, leave our industry. So that's just a breakdown of evaluating individual rules. The real meat of this is, what does it look like to see the maturity level of an entire organization? And a client reached out to us and asked us to do a assessment of all of their SIM use cases, detection rules, and we used SCP to evaluate that. It was worse than we thought. Out of about 1,050, 850 were at SDP 1 or 0. Zero's things that don't really matter, like they went to WebMD, not really threat related. 41 were at SDP 2. You started to see a little bit more maturity. You had some at SDP 3, and then again SDP 4 and 5. Now, right off the bat, that's not great, but maybe there's a good reason. Let's dig into it a little bit more. This is where it gets a little scary. So further going off of that, like that shelf life that we were talking about, or that resilience score, 69% bypassable within minutes, only 1% effective for years. That's not great. Oh, and those ones that we mentioned that are effective for years, they're actually broken, or they're not getting the right log sources. 82% were older than a year, 70% hadn't been touched in at least 1 to 5 years. And out of the 600 or so that were true threat detection rules, 534 were broken. So what we did is, let's just wipe all those out. Let's assume, okay, you've got yourself a few weeks of coverage, but you haven't touched it in 4 years. Let's just say that doesn't even matter. That's obsolete. Let's throw it out. That left us with the estimated current relevant coverage of about 0.6%. So for a long time, they were pretty happy with their coverage. They thought they were doing great. Their service provider was saying, hey, look at this great heat map. You're completely covered. You don't have to worry about a thing. But they really should have. Almost none of this mattered. And there were some egregious examples in the previous one. My favorite one to pick on is common worm port numbers from 2008 that hadn't been touched since 2008. Probably shouldn't give you the nice little blue happy color on the MITRE heat map. So what do we do when we realize that basically we're left wide open? Recommend taking a threat-informed defense approach. Don't try to boil the map and cover everything. Start with who's actually attacking you. What are the real risks? What are the real threats that you're facing? Plan it out and map it out, and start looking at opportunities where you can build truly resilient coverage to buy yourself a little bit of time. At least get to the point where you know that you can detect a breach without being completely blind to it, and then start building off of that foundation. And then, final thing, please actually test it. Make sure it fires. As someone who's pushed rules on accident a while back and found out years later that they didn't work, that's a really, really scary spot to be in. Don't do that. There's a lot of really great products out there for breach and attack simulation. Pull them out. Make sure that it's actually going to work when you need it to. This is a little example of what that TTP coverage looks like if we just map out the TTPs for those threat actors. Now, not all of those are relevant, or I should say not all of those are very actionable. Some of them are very noisy. They don't give you an idea of whether something's malicious or not. They're ambiguous. But MITRE CTID's fixing that in the next step. I think that's one of the upcoming projects, so just stay tuned. In conclusion, a few takeaways. Please don't assume that your out-of-the-box content is going to cover every threat. They're staffed with humans just like us. There are gaps, and there are also many times where I hear, oh, we've got it covered. We'll never be as mature as them, so let's just not even look at it. Let's validate that. Prove it, too. Don't just assume, hey, because there's a rule that exists, that it's going to work when you need it to. Battle test it. Make sure that it's firing, and do those drills. Keep track of your coverage. So there's going to be a lot of times where we just cannot effectively get more resilient coverage. Rather than just throwing up the color and moving on, keep track of where your weak points are, and at least go back and validate that they're still working for the threats you're facing. And then, if you have opportunities, then improve on that. Finally, this is both for your internal organization and honestly the industry. We need more transparency. Encryption, when we make those algorithms, everyone knows exactly how it works. We see the algorithm, we mess with it for 4 or 5 years and prove that it's going to be resilient. Why can't we do that with threat detection coverage? We hide this stuff. We hide the messiness of it and give folks a false sense of security, when in reality we need to just be honest with ourselves and build off of that. Few quick tips. Again, take a threat-informed defense approach when you're doing this. Focus on the folks attacking you. Don't miss the forest for the trees. There are a lot of gray areas, and we had a lot of debates about, hey, is this SDP2 or SDP3, SDP4? The main point is get a broad idea of where you're sitting at. Like, don't focus too much on the trees that you miss the forest. Be realistic. There are some rules that you won't have the log sources for, or there are some rules that simply are just going to be too noisy and you're never going to be able to operationalize them. Again, be aware of it, know your risks, know your blind spots, and validate that you're going to be able to at least detect those threats when they're in your environment, especially by focusing on non-ambiguous TTPs. And that's it.
Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. Maybe really quick. So one of the things driving this discussion is being able to determine that time to bypass. Yeah. What are data sources you think that could become available over time to help us determine that?
That's a great question. I honestly think that nothing's going to replace trying it out yourselves. I think this is where blue team and red team should work more together. Throw your red teamers at it, see how long it takes them. I guarantee it's probably not long in some cases, but in other cases you might stump them. Also, I think that we can leverage intel on that for this as well. How often do threat actors change their tools? And is that because it takes them a long time to figure it out, or is it because they're going after the lowest common denominator?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So purple teaming for the win?
Yeah, okay. Basically, yeah.
Okay, very cool, very cool. I don't think we have time for any other questions to keep up the program. I apologize, but excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.